Now to the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Have issued another round of subpoenas. The bipartisan panel is now demanding testimony and documents from leaders of the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and other groups involved in the violence leading up to and on January 6th. Committee Chair Benny Thompson writes in a statement, quote, "We believe the individuals and organizations we subpoenaed today have relevant information about how violence erupted at the Capitol and the preparation leading up to this violent attack." Willie.
Let's bring in senior reporter for NBC News who's been covering this world for so long, Ben Collins. Ben, good morning. Thanks for coming on. So obviously Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, those are broad terms that capture a lot of people. Who exactly are we talking about here with these subpoenas, and what's the significance?
Sure. So with the Oath Keepers, it's Stewart Rhodes who's been subpoenaed. So Stewart Rhodes is the head of the Oath Keepers. You know, in the days around January 6th, he was telling people what to bring to the riots to make it look like you don't have weapons, but you do have weapons. He's like, collapsible batons are in a gray area. Bring some flashlights, some D-cell flashlights. They can be used as weapons. You know, he was sort of upset with the president on January 6th because he didn't give enough specific instructions, he thought. And he said the Patriots are taking it into their own hands here. That's what he said to his followers that day. You know, in the run up to that on Telegram and in Discords, these groups specifically thought there would be violence that day and pushed that way. That's in part why Enrique Tarrio, who's the head of the Proud Boys, is also in this batch of subpoenas. Even though Tarrio never made it to D.C., he was brought in on a weapons charge beforehand, arrested on a weapons charge. Tarrio's a really interesting case. He's viewed as a patsy largely by the Proud Boys. They believe he's a federal agent because he has worked with the feds in the past. They believe he is some sort of, I don't know. They believe he's a front for something else within that community. The third most interesting case here is this guy named Robert Patrick Lewis, who works for this group called First Amendment Praetorian, kind of a brand new group from last September, came around, really got kicked up around this whole election fraud conspiracy, was tied to people like Mike Flynn. This guy is a veteran and has, is kind of new to this organizing space, but was really good at it. Created a bunch of rallies before January 6th. He has always had this public stance of anti-violence, but on January 6th, it looks like he got swept up. He said, "Today is the day the true battles begin." So these are groups that were talking about violence either in the run up to the 6th or the 6th itself.
Yeah, and they were pretty explicit about that, as you say. Part of what this committee is looking into, Ben, is any level of coordination between the groups you've just described to us and people in the White House, political leadership, members of Congress, perhaps. To what extent have you seen that in your travels online?
It's really hard to know. There was always this dance with them. Specifically with Rhodes, he said, the president, just as I suspected, isn't going to tell us to go to the Capitol and take it over. He's not going to tell you to do that. But, the president did say, let's all go to the Capitol. Let's all go, hear our voices heard. It's hard to know. These people used, as Rolling Stone reported earlier this week, these people used burner phones to talk to people at the White House. They knew what they were doing was not on the level. It's going to be very hard to unravel this. They always use encrypted communications, whether that's just like things like the Signal app, where they use backends to get around to people that they know they're not doing necessarily great things. So it's a very difficult thing. I don't know how this committee is going to find all this stuff out.
Hey, Ben. Good morning. Jonathan Lemire. Obviously, we're seeing some of the members of these extremist groups be swept up in this, but we know that federal law enforcement still believes they are a threat. And certainly people that I've talked to say that they fear that political violence will be more part of the national discourse, if you will, this midterms and next presidential cycle than perhaps ever before. Give us an update. We hear the occasional news about a rally at the Capitol or a state capitol, and none of that has materialized in anything particularly noteworthy, at least not yet. Give us an update as to where federal law enforcement believes the threat stands from these extremist groups across the nation.
So these threats have largely decentralized in the last few months. They've realized that they can't do this out and about anymore. Even with the Proud Boys Telegram channels, which are sort of the de facto front for these things, the people running those Telegram channels effectively run the movements there. They are not as explicit as they were in the days before the 6th because they didn't think they had back then they thought they had immunity. Now they don't think they have that anymore. So they are running through, like I said, some encrypted apps. They're doing things that are a little bit more private now than previously. And these are groups that are ground up groups. They are they work in these satellite ways. There are Proud Boys groups that are separate from each other on the East Coast and the West Coast. They go from the Pacific Northwest to California, and then on the East Coast, largely a different group of people, but there is a centralized mission and message there. But in large part, they're to one service, and it's protecting the people who support Donald Trump in general, and that's their larger goal.
Ben, and I guess to follow up on that a bit, would you say that the movement is stronger today than it was on January 6th? That you actually think that they've gained strength post-insurrection versus having it be diminished with all of the legal that they're going through and the violence that happened on that day?
I definitely believe that's true. I think it's important to note that they will discard leaders willy-nilly. You see people like for example, in Charlottesville at this trial, those people are persona non grata now. People like Chris Cantwell, he's like referred to as the crying Nazi or whatever. Those people are just gone. Richard Spencer, he used to be this thought leader in the white supremacy movement. Now it's, who knows? A lot of people don't think he should be around in that space anymore. So they'll get rid of leaders and keep the message and push the message forward. They'll find new heroes, whether those people want to be heroes or not. People like Kyle Rittenhouse, who I'm sure does not want to be the center of the white supremacist movement. They have lionized this man and created some hero worship around him. They are creating new figures, new caricatures in real time, and they're doing it using these spaces and these communications that built up over the last 4 or 5 years. It is absolutely larger than ever. It is absolutely more toned to regular American civilians than ever. And that's the difference than 4 or 5 years ago. It's not this fringe thing. They are trying to take over contemporary mainstream politics.
It's frightening. NBC's Ben Collins, thank you so much for your reporting. Thanks for being on this morning.